Hello and welcome to Red Red. Today I have the first of 3 end of year videos, and this one is going to be a pretty quick one because I am going to be summarizing all 61-ish books that I read this year in one sentence. The Total Library, Collected Non-Fictions by Jorge Luis Borges. You don't need the Akashic Records because fortunately we have been gifted with Borges' essays. V by Thomas Pynchon. I liked this more than I thought I would, and I can definitely retroactively see the William Gaddis influence in his work. The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. I had fun reading this, and I got the themes, especially after going and actually seeing a live performance of it, but it wasn't a top 5 all-time books that I kind of got the impression of from a lot of other influences. The Recognitions by William Gaddis. This is a top 5, if not maybe a top 1 book. The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This was one of those books that surprised me in that I didn't get a single thing out of it. M dash or semicolons, because I want to say one more thing. I feel like I had cultural osmosis so much of this book that reading it just did not even surprise me at all. Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. I definitely got the vibe that it was written and meant to be, or intended to be performed as a play. It's very short and sweet, and I think it's a pretty brilliant little novella. The Collected Poems of Vladimir Nabokov. I thought that these were better than I expected, but especially because I know that Nabokov started as a poet and then ended up going on to be a writer. However, I feel like his fiction and his English fiction still stands above and beyond anything else. The Notebooks of Malta Lourdes Brigger by Rainer Maria Rilke. Probably one of the books that I'm most interested in rereading, and there's just something so immensely special about this book. 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. This book taught me what Wikipedia prose is. Confessions of a Mask by Yukio Mishima. I liked this a lot more than I liked The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. The Selected Poems of Emily Dickinson. I liked this so much that I instantly went out and bought the complete collected Faber and Faber edition of Emily Dickinson's poems. White Teeth by Zadie Smith. It was my introduction to Smith, and I'm glad that I read it because it's definitely convinced me to go through and read every work of hers. Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. This is somehow magically avoids being cliche, even though I'm certain that I've seen extracts of this and probably groaned seeing them out of context. To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. My first Woolf fiction, and I loved it so much, and I'm just addicted to her prose style. If on a Winter's Night, a Traveller by Italo Calvino. I thought the novelty of this book would wear off faster than it did, and it really only kind of started to wear a bit thin in maybe the last couple of chapters, but still a very fun read overall. Poetry of Rilke. Not even this book's excellent cover can compete with how beautiful Rilke's poetry is. How to Read Literature Like a Professor by Thomas C. Foster. I like this a lot because it gave me some, an affirmation as to the way that I read books, but also some new insights and some new ways to talk about what I experience when I read books. A Naked Singularity by Sergio Della Pava. This is probably the book that I most regret not making a video about because it was so fun, but I got sort of so sucked in that I didn't even take any annotations. I just was addicted to it, and then I got to the end and realized that I had no way of talking about it, so unfortunately I let the idea of a video of it go by, but thoroughly enjoyed. Botchan by Natsume Soseki. I really got the feeling that I could tell why this book was important to Japanese people, but maybe went over the head of some Westerners. Still very fun and well written. Oblivion by David Foster Wallace. I've always preferred his essays, but I think that this collection is worth buying for good old Neon alone. The Color Purple by Alice Walker. The more I've thought about it, the more I've come to enjoy all of this book. I always enjoyed the first part. I found that halfway through it started to fall flat for me on a first read, but thinking about it more, I've kind of come around to just enjoying it as a whole. Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. I liked this book more than maybe I ought to, considering I know that it's a kind of Kung Fu Panda-esque Western interpretation of Eastern concepts. The poetic works of James Joyce. I thought these were fine, but it really surprised me that Joyce always considered himself a poet, considering his books, his novels are just, like, legendary. J.R. by William Gaddis, an affirmation that I made the right choice in deciding to read every single Gaddis book this year, and even though I have a personal soft spot for the recognitions, I can see why people may regard this as his best work. Rashomon and Other Stories by Ryunosuke Akutagawa. I loved this so much, and it was almost too much. It was almost too much to just read all of these stories and to read and learn about Akutagawa's life story just in one condensed hit. It's a very intense experience. That was like 3 sentences. Just imagine I'm using semicolons and em dashes at your leisure. Kobo Abe, The Woman in the Dunes. I still prefer The Boxman, but I liked the kind of overall allegorical aspect of this, and I think that I can understand why it had more mass appeal. Still excited to go and see the movie, which I haven't watched. Christopher Isherwood's Goodbye to Berlin. Again, I'm partial to A Single Man, but I think that for the cultural importance, and especially that this book actually came out before World War II was over, it was definitely an interesting cultural artifact. Carpenter's Gothic by William Gaddis. Underrated, I think, and definitely going to be something that I'm going to want to reread and reanalyze. Pride and Prejudice. A lot of fun. Somewhat expected because I had seen the movie, but definitely love Austen's writing style, and I'm keen to go and read other books of hers. Camera Lucida by Roland Barthes. I liked this a lot more than I expected, considering I'm an absolute noob in photography, and yeah, just a couple of concepts like the punctum stood out to me and have kind of informed the way that I look at photos. The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. This was one of those books that I'm glad I read just to kind of have read it, but I didn't get anything out of it, and I got that the book was sort of trying to make readers learn and see and teach them about a certain generation and a certain mindset, but just didn't have too much interest for me. Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. I celebrate Walt Whitman. Reader's Block by David Markson. My first Markson, it's just a list of trivia and it blew my tiny mind. Invitation to a Beheading by Vladimir Nabokov. For someone who's so adverse to allegory, this was a really unique read, and I think I'd like to reread this sometime soon. Beloved by Toni Morrison. This book is as worth it as how much work it was, and it was a lot of work. Ben Lerner, Leaving the Atocha Station. Don't know why, I just bounced off this book. I didn't get a whole lot out of it, which really surprised me considering the premise seems like it's a sort of book for me. But Stoner by John Williams, my first Stoner. I fell in love with his writing style, and I love Willie Stoner so much. The Loser by Thomas Bernhard. I feel like I have a spiritual bosom brother kinship with Bernhard that I'm going to talk about maybe a bit more in the future, but I just adored this book. 60 Stories by Donald Barthelme. Every single one of these stories is worth reading, and I feel like if I'm ever going to get off my butt and start taking writing seriously, I'm going to become a Barthelme disciple. Kappa by Ryunosuke Akutagawa. I read this quite quickly, maybe too quickly to really get it, but I can definitely see why this work was important as a sort of satire of A, society, and B, the self. Sea Above, Sun Below by George Salis. Thank you to George for sending me this book to read, but it was not a book for me. My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. I also really liked the premise of this, maybe similar to Leaving the Atocha Station. I loved the idea of sleep as being a means of dealing with chronic depression, but the book didn't have a great payoff for me. Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. Probably one of the biggest regrets is that I did not read every single thing Samuel Beckett ever wrote this year. The KJV Holy Bible, I made a video of this. It was my companion for 3 months, and yeah, Fathers and Sons by Ivan Turgenev. I got a lot out of the dialogue from this book, and the plot overall was really solid, but I think the dialogue was the standout kind of literary highlight for me. Zorba the Greek by Nikos Kazantzakis. I hated the former and loved the latter. Wittgenstein's Mistress by David Markson, probably one of 3 books ever that's made me cry. A Frolic of His Own by William Gaddis. I loved being in Gaddis's world, and I could see that it was a book that was him digesting a lot of the things that he'd learned with law, but didn't have the same impact as his early 2 works did. Agape Agape, as a musician who's interested in technology, this was fun, and I loved, again, I have a partial to Bernhard now because of The Loser, so it was great to see this pop up written in a Bernhardian rant. Butcher's Crossing by John Williams. Didn't get much out of this that I didn't get out of Moby Dick. The Written World and the Unwritten World by Italo Calvino. I didn't get a sense that these essays were very well connected. They felt like it almost felt like they were leftover essays, but I like how Calvino thinks, and some of the essays were pretty standout. Satantunga by Laszlo Krasznahorkai. I need to go and watch the film now because I loved this book a lot, and I also love Béla Tarr, so just gotta make that happen. The Complete Haiku by Basho, as translated by Andrew Fitzsimmons. I took a lot of notes. I love reading Japanese haiku, and I think that this collection was very worth my time. The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. This was my first Umberto Eco, and I kind of regret that it was a detective mystery story, because if the fact that I bounced off this book means that I just can't do that genre, but so much about Umberto Eco's entire mode of being appeals to me that I'm definitely still going to go and read more books of his. Beowulf. This book baffled me. The Dead Father by Donald Barthelme. I can see why his strengths are being a short story writer, but I still got some stuff out of this book. The Elements of Style by William Strunk Jr. and E.B. White. Just read this during my lunch break at work and took a lot of annotations. The Sonnets by William Shakespeare. They were also a lunch break read. I loved them a lot and took some notes, but overall I started to get the feeling like I needed to choose a couple of particular sonnets and just really study them rather than just kind of reading all 150 or whatnot in a row. Mason and Dixon by Thomas Pynchon. Probably definitely Pynchon's best novel, and easily the one in which he struck the biggest balance between intense intellectualism and great rollicking picaresque fun. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I'm still just loving everything that I read by Virginia Woolf. Poems, once again, and the play Exiles by James Joyce. I did not get much out of the play, although I like the idea of characters being allegories for entire countries. But yeah, I still just adore James Joyce's novels much more than his poems or play. And finally, Don Quixote by Cervantes. This is the book. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video where I'm going to talk about book awards for 2023.